Welcome to Earthborn Valor in tonight's story. An alien matriarch believed her empire was unshakable, until a simple human ring forced her to face a truth buried for centuries. What he revealed did not just challenge her throne, it shattered her entire world. Stay with us as we dive into betrayal, forbidden secrets, and a bond that could change everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of humanity's fight among the stars. The human's ring caught the first light of the alien dawn. It was small, silver, and plain. Nothing about it seemed powerful. Yet when the alien matriarch's gaze fell upon it, something inside her shifted. For centuries she had ruled her people with fire and steel. She had seen weapons that could melt mountains and ships that could tear holes through the sky. But never before had a single object made her heart hesitate. The war had not started with fire. It started with whispers. The human outpost on the barren moon was small, fragile, almost laughable to her empire. The matriarch thought it would be easy to erase them. Yet these humans refused to vanish. They held the mines, they built walls, they planted green and dust. Their voices carried stories of Earth, of oceans, forests, and cities that glowed like constellations. She dismissed them as weak dreamers, but their stubbornness grew sharp like blades. When the first strike came, it was sudden and brutal. Alien warships darkened the horizon, their shadows falling like storms. The humans answered with weapons that looked primitive, but their precision cut deep. The ground trembled with every clash. Smoke stained the sky for weeks. Villages burned, outposts crumbled, and the silence of space filled with screams. In the heart of this chaos, one man rose. He was not a general, not a commander from Earth, but a survivor. His name carried little weight among his own people, but his actions carved fear and respect across enemy lines. He carried himself with calm that unsettled even seasoned warriors. He walked into battle with nothing but his rifle, his words, and the small silver ring on his finger. The matriarch watched him from a distance. Reports flooded her council chambers. How he stood against 3 of her hunters and left them broken. How he crossed wastelands to rescue his kin. How his presence gave hope where despair had taken root. She should have despised him. Instead, a strange unease began to grow. One night, in the ashes of a ruined settlement, she finally faced him. The air smelled of iron and smoke. Her warriors formed a circle around them, waiting for the order to strike. He stood in the center, wounded but unbroken. His gaze was steady, his hand resting near his chest. That was when the dim firelight caught the glint of his ring. The matriarch's breath faltered. The symbol etched into the band was one she had seen before. Not in human records, not in their weapons, but deep within the hidden archives of her own people. It was a mark forbidden to speak of, a memory buried under centuries of silence. The man noticed her pause. His lips curled into the smallest of smiles as if he knew something she did not. He lifted his hand, turning the ring so it caught the glow of the burning ruins around them. "You see it, don't you?" His voice was low, almost calm, but it carried through the night like thunder. Her warriors stirred uneasily. None of them understood why their leader hesitated. None of them saw the storm crashing through her mind. That mark. It was not supposed to exist outside her bloodline. It was tied to the ancient pact, the truth of her people's beginning. But how could a human wear it? The matriarch's heart pounded. For a moment the world around her faded. The fire, the soldiers, the war. All that remained was the silver band and the quiet strength in the man's eyes. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted to crush him before the secret spread. Yet her voice caught in her throat. What if the stories whispered in the archives were true? What if this human carried the proof her empire had tried to erase? The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Her warriors shifted, waiting for the signal to kill. But the matriarch did not move. She saw the ring and she saw her world beginning to crack. The man finally spoke again, his words cutting like a blade. "This ring does not belong to me. It belongs to you." Her chest tightened. Every memory she had buried rose like a tide. The pact, the betrayal, the reason her people had turned to conquest, it all came rushing back. And in that instant she understood. The war was no longer about land or power or survival. It was about the truth he carried, and the secret that could shatter her throne. The night around them seemed to hold its breath. Fire crackled in the ruins, shadows flickered across stone. The matriarch's hand trembled against the hilt of her blade, but she could not lift it. The human's eyes never wavered. His presence was calm, almost merciful. Yet the weight of his words pressed against her like 1,000 armies. The matriarch knew then, this was not the end of war. This was only the beginning, and her world would never be the same again. The battlefield had fallen silent, but the silence was heavier than war itself. Smoke curled into the night sky, and the matriarch's warriors looked at her with unease. Their leader never hesitated. She had crushed rebellions, silenced rivals, and burned entire colonies without blinking. Yet now she stood frozen before a single wounded man and the faint glimmer of a silver ring. Her hand trembled against the hilt of her blade. She should have killed him then, ended the question before it grew dangerous. But her mind refused. That mark on the ring, the forbidden crest of the ancients, pulled her into memories she had spent lifetimes burying. "Take him," she commanded at last. Her voice cracked like stone splitting under weight. The warriors obeyed without question. Chains were thrown around the human's wrists, his ankles, his throat. Yet he did not resist. He let them drag him through the ashes, his gaze never leaving hers. His eyes burned with a quiet fire, not of hatred but of knowing. The matriarch turned away, hiding the storm in her face. But inside she was unraveling. If that ring was truly what she feared, then everything she had built, her empire, her throne, her very claim to rule, stood on a fault line ready to break. They carried him across the desert plains to the citadel, a fortress carved into black stone cliffs. It was a place where enemies vanished and secrets were chained. Prisoners screamed against iron doors, guards lined the shadows, and silence reigned like a second ruler. The human was thrown into a chamber of steel and firelight. Chains bound him to the wall, but still he looked unbroken. When the matriarch entered, cloaked in her armor of silver and obsidian, he did not bow. He simply lifted his hand, the ring glinting faintly in the dim light. "You know the truth," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "That's why you did not kill me." Her jaw tightened. "You speak as though you understand my people." "I don't need to," he replied. "Your silence told me everything." The words cut deeper than blades. No alien, no human had ever dared speak to her like that. Yet instead of rage, she felt something worse, fear. He was right. Her mind drifted back to the hidden archives. She remembered the forbidden scrolls sealed beneath layers of lies. They told of an ancient pact, a joining between her kind and another. A bond that was supposed to be eternal, but had been betrayed. Her empire had erased it, silenced it, and built power on its ashes. But the ring was proof that betrayal did not erase truth. She stepped closer, her shadow falling across him. "Where did you get it?" she demanded. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "It was given to me. Passed down. A gift from one who remembered what your kind chose to forget." The matriarch's chest tightened. If others knew, if even whispers of this truth spread, her empire would collapse from within. Her power would crumble. And yet she could not silence him. Killing him would not erase what he carried. She leaned closer, her voice sharp as a blade. "Why show it to me? Why not keep it hidden?" His eyes locked on hers, unflinching. "Because you needed to see it. Because the war is not against your armies. The war is against the lie you're standing on. And deep down you know it." Her breath caught. For the first time in centuries, she felt the weight of doubt pressing on her shoulders. Outside the chamber, her counsel whispered. They sensed her hesitation. They feared weakness. If she faltered, they would strike her down as quickly as they had served her. Yet here she was, standing before a human prisoner who had spoken words no warrior of hers dared to speak. She turned sharply, her cloak swirling like storm winds. "Leave us," she ordered the guards. The chamber doors slammed shut, leaving her alone with the man. The silence stretched. Fire crackled in the brazier, shadows danced across steel. She studied him, the way his eyes held hers without fear, the way his calm seemed stronger than any weapon. She felt anger at him, anger at herself, and anger at the truth the ring carried. Finally she whispered, though the sound was almost a growl, "If what you carry is true, then everything I have fought for is a lie." His response was quiet, but it shook her. Not a lie, a wound that has never healed. But it can, she stepped back as if struck. The idea of healing, of undoing centuries of conquest. It was madness. Yet the way he said it, the weight of his voice made her wonder if madness was exactly what her world needed. The matriarch's heart raged with conflict. She should kill him. She should silence him. But instead she found herself asking, "And if I listen? If I believe?" "Then," he said, his voice steady, "you will no longer be a ruler chained by fear. You will be something greater." For the first time in her reign, her hand slipped from the hilt of her blade. The matriarch turned away, her chest rising with heavy breaths. She hated this feeling, this weakness, this storm inside. But she could not deny it. The human's presence had cracked something inside her. The ring had shattered her certainty. When she finally left the chamber, her council waited. Their eyes searched her face for answers, for orders. She gave none. The war was no longer just about planets or borders. It was about truth. A truth that had found its way into the heart of the one woman who could not afford to believe it. And yet she already did. The citadel walls trembled with whispers. Servants moved carefully, avoiding the eyes of the guards. Counselors gathered in dark corners, their voices sharp like knives. Something was wrong. Their matriarch, the woman who had ruled with iron and fire, no longer looked unshakable. She had returned from the prisoner's chamber without a command of execution. No victory speech, no declaration of dominance, only silence. And silence in the heart of an empire built on fear was deadly. The council met that night in the Chamber of Judgment, a cavernous hall lit by towering flames. Shadows stretched across the marble floor, and the carved pillars seemed to lean in like silent watchers. 12 counselors sat in a circle, their eyes filled with suspicion. "She hesitated," hissed one. "I saw it with my own eyes." She looked at the human as if he were an equal, another spat. "That is weakness. Weakness cannot rule." The eldest counselor, his scales dull with age, leaned forward. "It is not weakness. It is danger. That ring he wears, it carries a mark from our forbidden past. If it is real, then everything we have taught our people is a lie." The hall grew colder. No one liked to speak of the forbidden past. To even whisper of it was treason. Yet now it stood in their throne room, bound to a human's hand. "What do we do?" asked a younger voice. "If she falters, our enemies will devour us." Already whispers spread through the soldiers. Some say the human carries destiny. Some say the matriarch fears him. The eldest narrowed his eyes. "If she cannot kill him, then perhaps we must." Meanwhile, in the chamber below, the human sat chained, yet his spirit seemed freer than the stone walls around him. He knew the matriarch would return. He had seen the conflict in her eyes, the war raging inside her heart. He had planted the seed. Now he waited for it to grow. But he also knew others watched. He could feel the tension in the guard steps, the weight of the eyes that lingered too long. Power was shifting, and power, once it begins to shift, never settles quietly. The matriarch stood in her private quarters, staring at her reflection. For the first time in centuries, she did not recognize the woman in the mirror. Her armor still gleamed, her crown still rested on her brow, yet her eyes betrayed her. They looked uncertain, restless, hunted. She touched her chest as if trying to calm the storm inside. The human's words echoed through her mind. Not a lie. A wound. Could she, the most feared ruler of her age, admit that her empire was built on a wound? Could she admit that the blood of her enemies, the ashes of conquered worlds, all masked a truth her people had chosen to forget? Her fists clenched. She wanted to bury the thought. She wanted to silence it with fire and steel. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ring. The door creaked. One of her most trusted commanders entered, a scarred veteran who had fought beside her for decades. His voice was heavy with concern. "My queen," he said, bowing low. "The council grows restless. They whisper of betrayal. They say you are protecting the human." Her eyes snapped to him. "Do you believe them?" He did not look up. His silence was answer enough. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "If I kill him, will it silence the whispers?" The commander finally raised his eyes. "It will silence him, but not the truth he carries." She turned away, her chest tightening. Even her most loyal warrior felt it. The shift in the air, the crack in the foundation. That night she descended once more into the prisoner's chamber. The human lifted his head as she entered, chains rattling lightly against stone. His face was bruised, blood marked his lip, but his eyes still burned with calm fire. "They fear you," he said quietly. She narrowed her eyes. "They fear me because I hesitate." "No," he replied. "They fear you because you saw the truth. Once seen, it cannot be unseen, and they know it." Her breath caught. For a moment she hated him for being right. She hated him for the way his words peeled back layers of her armor until only her heart remained exposed. She stepped closer, her voice sharp. "If I free you, my people will call me traitor. If I kill you, the truth dies with you. Either way, my throne is broken." His gaze softened, though his words struck harder than blades. "Your throne was broken long before I came. I am not the fracture. I am the mirror that shows it." Her chest burned. She wanted to strike him, to silence the voice that made her doubt everything she was. But instead, she found herself asking the question that terrified her most. "What do you want from me?" The human's answer was calm, steady, unshaken. "Not submission. Not power. I want you to remember what you were before conquest. I want you to see that your strength does not have to come from fear." The matriarch stared at him, her hands trembling. For the first time in her life, she felt the ground beneath her shift, not from an enemy's weapon, but from the truth itself. Above them, in the council chamber, the eldest counselor made his decision. "If the queen will not destroy the human, then we must destroy them both." The word spread like wildfire. Plans were drawn in the shadows. Assassins sharpened their blades. The throne was no longer just fractured, it was bleeding. And in the silence of her chamber, the matriarch finally understood. The real war had not even begun. The night over the citadel was unnaturally quiet. No drums of war, no chants of soldiers, only the sound of shifting winds brushing against the black stone walls. But inside, whispers crawled through the halls like venom. The council had made its choice. The human would die, and if the matriarch stood in the way, she would fall beside him. 3 assassins moved through the shadows. They wore the robes of silence, their blades soaked in poison that could kill even the strongest of their kind in moments. Their orders were clear: end the threat before dawn. The human sat chained in his chamber, staring at the faint glow of the brazier. He could feel it, the tension in the air, the coldness of the guards, the sudden absence of sound. His instincts, sharpened by survival, warned him. Death was coming. Above, the matriarch could not sleep. Her throne felt heavier than iron, her crown sharper than blades. She paced her quarters, her mind torn between duty and truth. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ring symbol. Every time she opened them, she saw the doubt in her counsel's eyes. And then a sound cut through the night, faint but wrong. She froze, her warrior's instincts awakening. Without hesitation, she seized her blade and stormed down the stone stairways toward the prisoner's chamber. Inside, the assassins struck. The first slipped through the door like smoke, moving silently toward the chained man. The second climbed the wall, ready to strike from above. The third waited near the door, blade poised for the final blow. The human lifted his head, his eyes locking on the first assassin. He did not flinch. Instead, he spoke. "You come in shadows because you fear the light." The words echoed in the stone chamber. For a heartbeat, the assassin hesitated. And in that heartbeat, the door burst open. The matriarch stormed inside, her blade a flash of silver fire. Her eyes burned with fury, not at the human, but at her own counsel. The first assassin lunged. She met him with a strike so fast the chains on the human's wrists rattled from the shock. The assassin fell, his poison blade clattering across the floor. The second dropped from the wall, but she twisted, catching his arm and driving her blade through his chest. His scream died before it could escape. The third rushed from behind, blade raised high. But before he could strike, the human lifted his chained wrists and slammed them against the assassin's face. The blow stunned him long enough for the matriarch to drive her blade through his heart. Silence returned. 3 bodies lay across the stone floor, their blood spreading dark across the cold slabs. The matriarch stood over them, her chest heaving. Her warriors had not attacked outsiders. They had attacked her prisoner. Which meant one thing. The council had moved against her. The human's voice broke the silence. "They fear you more than they fear me." Her hand tightened on her blade. She turned to him, fury and conflict tearing through her chest. "You should be dead. And yet you live because I chose it. Do not mistake that for mercy." He held her gaze. "It is not mercy. It is truth. You chose because deep down you know killing me would not end this war. It would only begin a darker one." Her breath caught. The words struck harder than the assassin's blades. She hated him for being right, yet she could not deny it. The council would not stop. They would try again, and next time, they might not aim for the human. They might aim for her. She turned sharply, her cloak snapping in the air. She shouted to the guards outside. Seal the halls. No one enters without my order. The guards obeyed, but their eyes betrayed fear. The news would spread quickly. The council would not forgive. Inside, she leaned against the wall, her blade dripping with blood. For the first time in her reign, she realized she was not fighting for her empire. You cannot unmake centuries of conquest with a ring and a fool's hope. The matriarch's blade trembled. Her strength began to falter. For a moment, doubt clawed at her heart. And then the human stepped forward, raising his chained hands so the ring caught the firelight. Its silver glint cut through the smoke, through the fear, through the lies. "This is not hope," he said, his voice steady and unshaken. "This is memory. You built an empire on forgetting, but memory always returns." The hall stilled. Even the clash of blades seemed to pause. All eyes locked on the ring. Soldiers on both sides felt their hearts quake. The forbidden crest shimmered in the fire, undeniable. The counselor's face twisted with rage. "Lies, it is nothing. Kill them both." But no one moved. Not the soldiers. Not the guards. Even those sworn to him hesitated, for the truth was burning too brightly to ignore. The matriarch stepped beside the human, her voice rising like fire. "I was queen because I was feared. But if I must fall to stand with truth, then let fear be damned." Her blade struck the counselor's staff. Sparks exploded, light burst across the hall, and the ancient weapon cracked in two. The counselor staggered, his eyes wide with shock. The human's voice rang out, carrying through stone and fire. "No throne built on lies will ever stand." With a final strike, the matriarch's blade cut the counselor down. He fell at the base of the stairway, his blood soaking into the marble floor. Silence followed. A silence heavier than war. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Some dropped to their knees. Others stared in disbelief. The rebellion had ended not with victory, not with conquest, but with truth laid bare. The matriarch stood over the body of her fallen counselor, her chest heaving. She looked at her people, those who doubted, those who believed, those who did not yet know what to believe. And then she looked at the human. Her crown felt heavier than ever. Cracked, bloodied, broken. She lifted it from her brow and let it fall to the ground. The sound echoed like thunder. "I will not rule as I once did," she declared. "If I am to rule at all, it will not be by fear. It will be by truth." The words rippled through the hall. For the first time in centuries, her people saw her not as a tyrant, but as something else. Something untested, something new. The human lowered his hands, the ring still glimmering faintly. Their eyes met, and in that moment the future shifted. The citadel stood in ruins. The council was broken. The throne was shattered. But from the ashes, something greater had been born. Not just survival. Not just power, a beginning. She was fighting for her life. The human spoke again, his voice softer now. "You saved me. Not because you had to. Because you chose to. That choice will break you, or it will free you." Her eyes burned as she turned to him. "And what if it breaks me?" "Then," he said, his voice steady, "the world you built was already broken." She could not answer. Her silence was heavier than words. That night she did not return to her throne. She remained near the chamber, watching the man she should have killed. The man whose presence had already divided her empire. Above them, in secret halls, the council gathered again. The eldest counselor slammed his fist against the stone table. "She protects him. She killed our own to keep him alive. She has turned against us," another voice growled. "Then the throne must change hands. The people must see her as weak. We will spread the word. Their queen bows to a human. Whispers turn to plans, and plans turn to promises of blood." The matriarch did not hear their words, but she felt the shift in the air. She knew her reign was no longer secured by fear. Her enemies no longer lurked in shadows. They walked openly in her own halls. And at the center of it all, bound in chains yet unbroken, the human waited. The war was no longer hers alone. The war was becoming his. Dawn bled across the horizon, but the citadel did not wake with order. It woke with murmurs. The bodies of the assassins had been discovered. Word spread through the ranks like wildfire. They had not been killed by an enemy, but by their own queen. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Servants whispered in the kitchens. Even the lowest guards felt the shift in the air. Fear no longer flowed only downward. It climbed back up toward the throne. The council wasted no time. They summoned generals, commanders, and envoys into hidden chambers. Their words were sharp, poisoned with doubt. "She protects the human. She kills our own to defend him. She has betrayed her blood. One general slammed his fist against the stone table. Then she is no queen. A queen does not hesitate. A queen does not protect prey. The eldest counselor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming cold. Then let us make it clear to the people. The human is not her prisoner. He is her master. And if she bows to him, then she no longer rules. The plan was simple. Lies disguised as truth. Rumors sharpened into weapons. Soon, the citadel itself would turn against its own heart. Down below, the human remained in chains. Yet his spirit seemed to grow stronger each hour. The matriarch stood near him, though she hated herself for it. She had not left his side since the night of the attack. Every time she tried, the thought of another assassin slipping in made her return. "You are reckless," she hissed at him. "Do you know what you've done? By sparing you, I have invited war inside my own walls." He looked at her calmly, his voice steady. "The war was already here. You just chose to see it." Her chest tightened. She wanted to strike him, to silence that calm voice that tore through her defenses. Yet she could not. Because he was right. Again. The door creaked open. One of her loyal guards stumbled in, blood dripping down his arm. "My queen, the council stirs the garrison. They say you have fallen. Soldiers gather at the gates." Her blade was in her hand before he finished. Rage burned in her chest. Her own council dared to defy her, dared to raise arms within her fortress. She turned to the human, eyes flashing. "This is your doing." But his reply froze her. "No, this is theirs. You only gave them the excuse. The truth frightens them, and frightened rulers will always choose betrayal." Shouts erupted in the halls. The clang of steel against steel rang through the corridors. The rebellion had begun. The matriarch stormed into the open halls, her loyal guards rallying to her side. The sight before her made her blood boil. Soldiers once sworn to her banner now stood divided. Some raised their weapons against her, their eyes burning with anger and fear. Others hesitated, unsure whom to follow. At the center of the chaos, the eldest counselor stood high on the balcony, his voice booming like thunder. "Your queen has fallen. She bows to a human. She kills her own to protect him. She is no longer fit to rule." Gasps rippled through the ranks. Some soldiers roared in agreement, surging forward. Others froze, doubt twisting in their eyes. The matriarch lifted her blade, her voice cutting through the uproar. "Lies, I fight for truth, not chains. I spill blood only when betrayal demands it." Her words shook the hall, but the counselor's venom was stronger. He raised his arm, pointing toward the prison chamber. "Then why does the human still live? Why does he walk with the mark of our forbidden past? Kill him if you are truly our queen." The soldiers turned, their eyes shifting from her to the chamber door where the human was kept. The demand hung heavy in the air. The matriarch's chest heaved. This was the moment. If she struck him down, she would silence the doubt. If she spared him, she would lose everything. And then the chamber doors opened. The human stepped forward, chains still binding his wrists, but his presence filled the hall like fire. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the clamor. "You fear me because I carry truth. You want to kill me because it is easier than facing it. But killing me will not save you. It will only prove that your throne stands on lies." The hall froze. Soldiers stared, their weapons trembling in their hands. The counselors' faces twisted with rage. The matriarch's heart thundered. She should silence him. She should drag him back into the dark. But instead she let him speak. "Look at her," he said, his voice rising. "Your queen who stood against assassins, even her own council, to protect what she knew was right. She does not bow to me. She stands because she is strong enough to face truth. Can you say the same?" The words ripped through the hall like a storm. Soldiers shifted, their loyalty tearing in two directions. Some lowered their weapons. Others growled with fury. The eldest counselor screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "Do not listen to him. He poisons your mind. He is the end of us." But the soldiers were already choosing. Some fell to their knees before the matriarch, their eyes burning with renewed loyalty. Others turned their blades toward her, their rage fueled by the council's lies. The citadel erupted in blood. Steel clashed against steel, screams filled the air, and fire spread across the halls. Through it all, the matriarch and the human stood side by side. She fought with her blade, he fought with his voice, and together they became something neither of them had intended. Not ruler and prisoner, not conqueror and captive, but a symbol. A spark, and the empire would never be the same again. The citadel shook with chaos. Flames licked the stone walls, smoke filled the high arches, and the clash of steel roared through every corridor. Brothers fought brothers, soldiers turned on soldiers, all for the question of loyalty. To the council's lies or to the queen who dared to protect a human. The matriarch moved through the storm like a blade of fire. Her armor was streaked with blood. Her crown cracked against her brow, but her strikes never faltered. Every swing of her weapon cut down betrayal. Every command from her lips rallied the loyalists to her side. Yet no matter how many enemies fell, the war did not stop. The council had fanned the flames too deeply. The citadel itself had become a battlefield. Beside her, the human moved with quiet defiance. His chains clattered with every step, but his eyes shone brighter than the torches around them. He did not fight with a blade. He fought with presence, with words carried across the chaos. "You fight because you are afraid," he shouted to the soldiers who rushed him. "Afraid of truth. Afraid of change." But fear cannot rule forever. Some froze mid-strike, their blades trembling. Others snarled and pressed forward, but the hesitation spread like cracks through stone. The matriarch saw it. She felt it. His voice was doing what her sword could not, breaking the chains of fear that bound her people. But then, above the roar of battle, a chilling sound rose. The deep horn of the council. The eldest counselor appeared at the top of the great stairway, his robes torn but his eyes blazing with hate. Around him stood an elite guard, armored in black and silver, sworn to protect the council with their lives. He raised his staff high, his voice booming across the hall. "Enough! She has betrayed us all. She bleeds for the human, not for her people. Cut her down. Cut them both down and let the empire rise clean from their ashes." The elite guard surged forward. Their weapons glowed with energy, forged in the hidden forges of the council. Loyal soldiers tried to block them, but they were crushed beneath the weight of the charge. The matriarch's chest burned. She had faced armies. She had faced conquerors from beyond the stars. But never had she faced betrayal so close, so deep. She turned to the human, her voice raw. "Stay behind me." But he shook his head. "No, this is not only your fight, it is ours." The words struck her harder than the enemy's blades. For the first time, she felt something strange. Not the burden of command, not the weight of isolation, but partnership. The elite guard reached them. The hall erupted into a storm of steel. The matriarch fought like a living flame, her blade tearing through the armored ranks. Sparks flew, blood sprayed, and her roar echoed through the citadel like thunder. The human, though chained, seized a fallen spear and drove it into the chest of a guard who lunged for her back. Together they stood. Together they refused to fall. But the eldest counselor descended the steps, his staff glowing with a power older than both of them. His voice was venom. "You cannot win.